All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to True Crime Loser. Hope you're doing well. Hope you had a good holiday break. Today, at first, we're going to do a Jussie Smollett update. I think things are about to get interesting with this one. So, first, after 2 months of searching, New York Times said that prosecutors from 101 counties, which to me seems like a lot of counties, turned it down. They said, we do not want to be the special prosecutor for Smollett. It's probably not a popular job because you got to come in and say, hey, Kim Foxx, sorry that you came out a little incompetent on this one, so now I have to redo the job. It's probably not the best vibes to roll in there like, hey, everybody, sorry that what you guys did wasn't even real, but I'm here now. And so after 101 counties turned it down, the judge in the Smollett case started looking at private sector attorneys and landed on a guy named Dan Webb. And no one seems to be real happy or real unhappy about Dan Webb, so that's probably good. He has been a special prosecutor before. In 2012, the nephew of the current mayor of the mayor of Chicago at the time got into a bar fight and killed someone, and he was the special prosecutor for that. So I guess so he gets to open up everything. That he gets to look at the evidence, which was sealed. The records have been sealed. In his privilege plea deal that he got, they came out and were like, oh yeah, everything is also sealed. And so now the records are unsealed. So I picture Dan Webb, the prosecutor, going in and being like, hi, I'm the new prosecutor. I'd like to get the Smollett file. And the evidence guys are like, come with us. And they have to go like down corridors and hallways and then an elevator 50 feet down, and then they get out and it's just solid rock walls, and it's dark, and then they finally open a big like bank vault door, and inside there's just a room with a spotlight on a box, and the box says J. Smollett. And Dan Webb goes in and picks up the box, and he's like, all right, well, that seemed pretty unnecessary, but thanks, guys. The records have been sealed for life. So he's going to start looking at all the evidence, talking to all the people, anybody that investigated, he gets to interview them on the record. And so, in my opinion, the most interesting interview on that list is going to be Kim Foxx, the previous prosecutor that allowed this whole thing to happen. And so there was a guy that works for the Chicago Tribune named John Cass did a podcast with the retired judge that actually filed the motion to get the special prosecutor. So the Tribune reporter and the retired judge were talking about Kim Foxx being interviewed by Dan Webb, and we're thinking maybe she would just take the fifth over and over and over again, which is always just a horror show to sit there and just be like, I would like to plead the fifth. Just to have that tape out there where you're sitting there, just wince smiling, going, the fifth. Yep, the fifth for that one too. You just look so bad. But in the podcast, they were saying that would be because Kim Foxx has got to hire a lawyer. I wonder what kind of summer she's having. Just probably, yeah, everything's cool, when she's at barbecues with her friends. But when she's getting ready for bed, looking in the mirror, and the wrinkles are getting more defined and the hair is getting grayer, I wonder if she thinks, was this all worth it? To get some cabinet seat or some little payout to help Jussie Smollett? Just some actor dude in Empire? I can't, even, to just go down as incompetent is not very attractive for a lot of people. So she's got to get a lawyer, and they were saying it would be an attractive strategy for her lawyer once Dan Webb comes around and like, okay, Kim, let's talk about this. Let's talk about how you guys came up with this non-prosecution agreement that put it so he would do community service, but he had already done that community service and a $10,000 bond. And then, so they were saying maybe she'll just take the fifth over and over and over again. Well, then Kim, I think, probably responded to that story by putting out a statement. Where is it? And she said, and I think with this statement you can see that she's not going to have to really answer any of these hard questions. She'll do what they all do and just kind of ramble and say too many things, but a lot of the right words, and then doop-a-da-doo, she'll be on her way. But this is her statement. The ability to talk about my record, the ability to talk about where we've been. I'm ready for that conversation all day and look forward to sharing with people of Cook County the commitment that we have to serving them. All right, pretty political, doesn't say much, but she's coming out confident, saying, I'm not going to plead the fifth over and over again. I have nothing to hide. So I am very interested in how Kim Foxx handles this whole thing. Again, I would love to be a fly on the wall in the meeting with her and her lawyer. And then another story came out since the last video I did where Jussie is asking the city of Chicago to get rid of the lawsuit. They're suing him for $130,000. And the city said, nah, no. And I think they might even be doubling it. They're allowed to ask for up to 3 times as much. And so they were like, I think we may even ask for $260. At first, it was $130. But then it became a thing of like, oh, now it's triple. Can you feel the truth? I watched his interview just to get back in the Smollett vibe last night. I watched his interview, the one where he was like, if it was a Muslim man, then would they be able to see the truth? At first. Oh, what an insane choice it was to do that interview. And then I also watched his like Breakfast Club interview and some of his Wendy Williams interviews. And the guy had it made. He's doing these interviews and everybody loves him. Everyone's like, so tell us about the music career that you've got started. And he's talking about it like I'm an artist, It's like a blah, blah, blah. And now what does he even get to do? He just probably sits in some house in California. California can be even if he's in LA, California can be an isolating town. I went to LA for a couple weeks and just ended up sitting in a house in Pasadena during the day, just being like, am I in LA right now? It kind of feels like I'm just in a house in some subdivision. So I'm sure he just sits in a house and Googles his name to see what everyone's saying about him. So that's got to be. And then he came out with he had a PR firm, because there's nothing sterile and hateable about just putting out a statement through a PR firm. But recently, a public relations firm that's representing old Jussie put out a statement that said, every iota of what he said can be corroborated by the police. That's when you know you're not in a good spot, is when you're saying things of like, hey, everybody, every iota of what I said can be corroborated, all right? So that's something, every iota. And everybody's just like, yeah, well, I guess it's possible that every iota can be corroborated, or honestly, we don't really know what that means, Jussie. But the problem is all the words that you're saying aren't true. Maybe every iota is corroborated, but the problem is the words, okay, not the iotas. Every iota of what I've said is corroborated, all right, everybody? So just back off. The last video I did, the most recent interview of anybody in his family was his brother and sisters on People Magazine's YouTube page. And they were smiling, and they asked him, all right, we're going to ask the tough questions. How's your brother doing? And they start wince smiling, and they're like, he's great. Thanks for asking. He's got a lot in the works. And then she said corroborated too. She was like, everything that he said has been corroborated. So I think that that's their strategy right now, is just wince smile and say corroborated a lot. Just keep smiling and just keep saying corroborated. I think why they're doing that is because it's like he said that there was a rope around his neck. That could be corroborated. He said 2 people approached him. So it's I guess, a strategy to be like, well, if what you're saying isn't true, I guess just say corroborated. Again, this whole video is allegedly. Don't sue me. All right. So he came out with his big every iota, people. Every iota. And then another interesting story popped up that was related to it, where a Jimmy Fallon writer who had exited writing for Fallon recently to write on a Comedy Central show about Chicago. And they asked, in an interview, they asked him, are you going to joke about Smollett? Because it's about Chicago. And the former Jimmy Fallon writer was... If he would have just said, no, it's not really the vibes of the show, I wouldn't have even commented or thought about it. But what he said was, so this is an ex-writer for a late night talk show, right? And so he goes, in the interview, he goes, no, it's a straight up tragedy. There's nothing funny about it. Talking about the Smollett thing. Just... it's too sad to joke about. There is nothing funny about it. It's a tragedy. Too sad. And I thought that was interesting that a late night comedy talk show writer would say that, because, one, it's like nothing funny about it. Is there really nothing funny about it? I don't know, man. I think it possibly could be the funniest story ever. We've been joking on it up with this show for months. Having fun. And Chris Rock, one of the greatest comedians of all time, at that award show smashed a while back talking about it. And Dave Chappelle, possibly the greatest comedian of all time, had 4 hilarious. So I get that there's parts of it that are dark and very serious and very scary and should be taken very seriously, but about 80% of it is just comedic gold. And why I think it's interesting that he said that is, that's the way I've been feeling about late night recently. All the late night shows, they don't come out and say it, but the vibe is like, hey, everybody, welcome to late night. I know this is a comedy show, but the times are just too sad and too scary right now. So no jokes tonight. We're going to do a karaoke contest where we wear diapers. So that should be hilarious instead. But too sad for jokes tonight. I kind of feel like the guy in the back, like, can we just joke about the sad shit? What about that? Anything? No? All right, sorry. It just has felt like that. And then to hear that story where the late night writer on the way out is like, that's a tragedy. Nothing funny about that. It's like, yeah, that's kind of what the shows have felt like this whole time. And then it kind of reminds me a while back with the whole Fallon show. I think the Fallon show maybe came out ahead with that guy leaving. No offense. But then it kind of reminds me of, so Norm Macdonald was scheduled to do this is probably a year ago, months ago or a year ago, kind of a similar story. But he was scheduled to do the Fallon show. And the day or two before, he did another show. It was either a podcast or a show much smaller than the Fallon show. And this is the height of the Me Too stuff, and Louis and Roseanne had just gotten, completely taken down. And on this long podcast-like show, Norm at some point says he feels for his longtime friends, Roseanne and Louis, that a lot of people haven't lost everything like that, and that he was talking about how for a while he said something about how like it used to be if 500 women accuse a guy, and then it went down to like if 10 women, and then now it's like if one woman. And he was like, well, I don't know about that. And I can't remember who he was talking about, but there was someone that had just like one accuser, and then it turned out to be. But anyway, they're doing like a long form conversation about the Me Too movement, which isn't easy to talk about. And and they're going over it. Well, like I said, he's doing Fallon the next day. A couple of the lines that he said in this long conversation about a tough topic come out where he's like, I'm happy the Me Too movement is calming down a little bit. And, the thing about Louis and Roseanne, and the thing about like now if one woman, so all of those make headlines the next day. And the Jimmy Fallon writer or producer, either one producer or possibly like all of the producers, when they read that, started literally crying. And so Jimmy comes in, and all the producers are crying because of and I'm not against crying at work by any means. If that's place to break out into tears, in my opinion. But if you're a producer of a late night comedy talk show, the thought of someone speaking or talking an opinion, I don't think should be, it's the wrong job, I think. And so all the producers are crying, and Norm gets to the show, and poor Jimmy comes in, and he has to be like, listen, Norm, what you said the other day on the show is everybody's fucking crying in the back. And Norm was like, should I not be on the show? And Jimmy's like, yeah, I don't think so. And I feel so bad for Jimmy because Norm is one of the best panel guests of all time. He's one of Howard Stern's favorite guests. He was on Letterman, one of Letterman's favorite guests. You can go on YouTube and watch hours of him on late night shows just murdering. And to go in and to tell Norm, hey, buddy, everybody's crying in the back and I can't have you on tonight, must have just been brutal. And so he's canceled from Fallon. And Howard Stern, who I'm sure they were thinking, God, this is too easy, swoops in. They're like, get Norm on the phone. We'll have him on our show and take advantage of all this publicity and everything that came from his comments. And so he does. But what I don't understand about Fallon is why not, you hear that he came out with saying stuff about Me Too. If you disagree with it as the Fallon show, you would think they would be like, all right, this is perfect. This is going to be great TV. Okay. Cancel the karaoke contest in diapers. We got something tonight. And the writers and the producers and Jimmy come together and they stay up all night and they're brewing coffee and they get their point of view for what they're going to ask Norm about. They get their arguments down. They say, this is what these are the problems we have with what Norm said. God, this is going to be great TV. And then Norm comes on, and it would be so easy to set it up. You could say, Norm, hey. Jimmy goes, hey, Norm, so regarding the Me Too movement on a show, you said that you're glad it calmed down, and that would probably get a little laugh, and then Norm could talk about it, and they could go back and forth, maybe come to some truth, to an understanding. Or if Jimmy wanted to go in a darker direction, he could have said, Norm, we've been a big fan of you for a long time, and what you said on the show 2 days ago made all of our producers cry. Everyone was bawling. We ran out of tissues. Explain that, and you could just go from there. I just figured that a comedy late night talk show producer would hear of an idea that needed to be disagreed with or that they felt was wrong, and they go, boom, all right, we got a night. But no, it was canceled, and the Stern show swept in, and it's a long show again where you can really kind of get to the meat That's why Joe Rogan is so popular. You can really get to the meat of stuff if you talk for a long time. And Norm is apologizing and saying, I wasn't, in no way minimizing what victims of Me Too stuff have to go through. And while making that point, he said, you would have to have Down syndrome not to feel for the victims of Me Too. Well, then everybody got outraged when he said that. So then he had to go on to The View a day or two later and apologize that he said Down syndrome during his Me Too apology on Stern, that he got him canceled from Fallon. And that's really about it. And that the apology and what he later went to explain is he was going to say that you would have to be a retard not to feel bad, but then at the last moment he thought people were going to get offended by that word, so then he switched it to Down syndrome, which everyone was, it probably came out worse. But anywho, that's where we're at with the whole Smollett. I think it's going to get really interesting now. I think Dan Webb's going to get a new or a whole new grand jury maybe to look for it. I was thinking if I was Dan Webb, there was already a grand jury. They picked 16 felonies. Unless going through everything, there's some corruption or some reason that was the grand jury wasn't correct, I would just probably go with that, because it's like, this is what the grand jury already picked. Doesn't seem like there's any corruption or anything that would warrant me. And then I think that he should be able to plead way down. Probably had a way better chance to before he handled it like this in the PR firm. Every iota of what I say is, I have absolutely no ability to comprehend any of the iotas, is where we're at with this one. But yeah, it's going to get interesting. I can't wait to see the first steps of the whole thing. But I'm going to cut it off there. I hope you guys had a great holiday weekend. We are back. I'll see you next time. Why? Stavin' why? Shamita.